Let's look at the procedures for today's part of the experiment on why do things burn, or rust in this case. Rusting and burning are the same process chemically. What we did yesterday was we put into test tubes some plain gauze, some gauze that's wrapped around iron which heats up as it rusts, and this one has two of those little heating pads in it, and we put them in test tubes and turned them upside down to trap the air inside. We made a line on each of the test tubes to show what the starting volume of the air inside the tube was, and today we're going to measure how much did the volume inside the tube change. So one thing I did was I started by taking a rubber band and twisting it around the top of the test tubes, and we're going to use that to mark the volume of the air inside today. So I'm going to pick up my test tube. Here's the one that has just the plain gauze, and I'm going to hold it so that the water level is right at the black line that I drew yesterday, and it looks like the level of the water inside the tube is at the exact same place that it was yesterday. So that means that the volume of air inside this control tube has not changed at all. So I'm just going to leave that one alone. This is the one that has one of the heating pads in it. I'm going to raise the tube up until the water is right at the black line, and I can see that the level of the water inside the tube looks like it's higher. That's because the volume of the air inside the tube has gotten smaller. Instead of increasing, the volume decreased. This rubber band that I put around the top, I'm going to slide that down until it's right at the level of that water in the tube. I'm trying not to let the water come out. So I'm sliding this down. The black line is held right at the water level, and then the rubber band I'm sliding down until it gets to the level of the water inside the test tube. And then I'll do the same thing for the other test tube as well. This one had the two pads in it, so I'm holding the tube so the black line is at the water level. I'm sliding the rubber band down until it's at the level of the water inside the test tube. I want to mark off the volume inside there because we're going to use a technique to measure the volume of the air inside. So now I've got the rubber bands both at the same level as the water inside the tube. Next, we'll take the tubes out and let the water drain out like this. I'll take the control tube out too, and I'll put that over on the side. Take the other tube out. Now the rubber band is marking the level of the water that was inside the tube, and now what we want to do is turn the tube over and then use a pipette, and we're going to fill it all the way up to the black line with water, and then we're going to use that as our starting point for making our measurement. Now as you're doing this, water is going to soak into the pad that you put in there. It's going to take any space of the air that was in there, so we've got to squeeze that out to make sure there's no extra air bubbles in there taking up volume. We want to measure all of the volume of the air that's inside the tube at the start. So I'm filling it up to that black line that I drew. If your black line came off, you can redraw it. It was 4 centimeters from the open end of the tube. Okay, I'll use my tweezers just to poke at the pad there and make sure that any bubbles of air come out, because those are taking up volume. And I'm trying to measure all of that volume, so poke out any air bubbles. There's quite a bit of air bubbles in there. Okay. Squeeze them all out. And you might need to really push that in there. Okay. Try not to poke a hole though into your pad. Now you might need to add some more water to get back to that black line. Okay, so I squeezed the air bubbles out of the pad, and then I filled it all the way back up to that black line. That represents the starting volume of the air in the tube before you did the experiment yesterday. Now I want to find out what's the volume of the space between the black line and the rubber band. That represents how much did the volume of air inside the tube change during the experiment. So I'm going to take a graduated cylinder and my pipette, and I'm going to suck the water out from the black line down to the rubber band and put it into the graduated cylinder. So I'm drawing that liquid down and putting it into the graduated cylinder until it gets right to the rubber band. Right there. Okay. And then I'll look and see what is the volume, how many little lines of volume are there. When I count up, the first line that you see is not 1 but 2. The fat line here is 5. So this is 2, 3. This is 3 milliliters. So I have 3 milliliters of volume inside the graduated cylinder. Those 3 milliliters of volume are the volume of air that changed inside the tube. So I'll write that down for my one pad in step number 3, that this is the change in the gas volume, 3 milliliters. When you look at the graduated cylinder, the first line on the bottom is not 1 milliliter, it's actually 2 milliliters. The 1 milliliter line is skipped because it's hard to read. But if you count down from this longer line, that's 5 milliliters, then 4, and then 3, going back down. Okay, so I wrote down 3 milliliters for one pad. And now I'm going to, I don't want to dump this out, I'm going to pour all the rest of this water in there because I want to know how much volume there was in there to start with. And I'm going to squeeze out the water from the pad. I'm going to squeeze that a little bit and then pour that in there too because I want to know how much water there was to start with. And then I'll read the graduated cylinder up from the 10. So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, this is the long line again, that's 15 milliliters. So I'll record that the starting volume in step number 4 for one pad was 15 milliliters. Then there's some calculations to do, which we'll look at together. But you do the same process for the other test tube. Fill with water all the way up to the black line. Use the tweezers to squeeze out any bubbles, and then fill it back up to the black line. And then draw off this liquid here to find out how much it was, and repeat all the same steps. When you're all done, just leave your materials on the tray, and I'll clean those up after you go.